Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Resident Alien. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So first and foremost, I think it means a lot. The fact is that Asta is still dealing with all this. Obviously, she has PTSD from it, and it means the first time she's ever killed anyone, regardless of the situation, and Asta's trying to kind of deal with it all on her own because, well, she doesn't want to really lean on Darcy because Darcy's already dealing with enough. The fact of the matter is, it's already pretty rough for her because everything between her and Elliot, it is nice, everything's great, and she's like, oh, it's always the quiet ones, because she's like, oh no, the sex was great. She's like, it's always the quiet ones, but it's just like she doesn't want to drag him into all of this. But Asta's like, no, I'm the one. You're not dragging him anything. He pursued you, but then also it's like Asta feels at fault because it's like, right, I dragged you into this. Darcy obviously made this choice because she wanted to help out her best friend, and so Asta's dealing with her own feelings about it, but also feeling guilty about the fact is that she dragged Darcy into this, but also like there's frustration and anger at Harry because, well, not only it's because of the circumstances of her life getting way more complicated with him around, but also because he did wipe her memory, and that also caused some issues between her and Jay, and now she doesn't think there's ever going to be any way of repairing things. She's like, I'm a terrible mother, and it's like, well, you're not a terrible mother, you're a good person. It's like, I mean, the reason why you forgot is because, we were busy, we were dealing with the whole, you killed someone in self-defense, but still, like, it's like, that's kind of the bad thing of it, but, and her dad knows something's up, and he asks her to, talk about it, but Asta doesn't want to. Once again, she wants to kind of shoulder a lot of that on her own, but ultimately it becomes too much, and she needs to talk to her dad, because during the investigation, which poor Liv, every time she throws out a suggestion, Detective Torres would just be like, oh yeah, like she's like, oh, this would be a good hiding spot. It's like, oh, if it's a good hiding spot, most likely the hitmen are there. And Liv's like, that's what okay, yep, stroke of genius coming from you there. But while investigating, and I love that Liv still keeps trying to like one-up Detective Torres because she doesn't like how her and Mike have kind of gotten a lot closer, because it's like, especially after they've gotten so close, she feels like she's kind of getting like nudged out. It's like, yeah, it's been a duo for so long, and now in this, she's kind of the third wheel in this new duo between Mike and Torres. So, but she goes to Asta for help, looking into some of Sam's patient files, some of the people that died, and it turns out they're some of the family members, which included Judy, which I love. She had the whole thing with Kevin the cat, and just kind of like making all the noises and being like, oh, you're a cat lady, Judy. Interesting. Which I also kind of feel bad for Judy, because it's like, oh yeah, there's a Mike and Torres thing going on, so there's not going to be a Mike and Judy thing, which is like, oh, I think she's going to walk away a little heartbroken. We'll see how that kind of plays out, but the moment they introduce the fact is like, oh, there's a lot of people who started getting sick, I immediately was like, they're most likely dumping some kind of chemicals into the water, and they're covering up the fact there's a lot of people who got sick and died because of it. I was like, that's what this is all about. And they must have paid Sam to cover up some records and stuff, because the patients that died were his, so he might have discovered it, and then well, because also, like, we know it's not, because obviously the OG Harry was a part of this too, so either he willingly was a part of, like, them dumping the water in this, and Sam got found out, because, like, Sam was getting paid, like, because Sam wanted to expose all of them, but he was as much of a part of this too, so I think up to some extent, he kind of went along with everything until it became too much, or maybe he stumbled across it and then Harry had to kill him. But I could have sworn he was a part of all of this too. That's why they got Harry to end up killing Sam. I think, I don't remember now, because obviously it got brought up earlier this season about all of that, and I just don't remember now. Do correct me in the comments down below whether or not Sam knew or not. I think he did know he was a part of this. Either way, But now it makes sense. It's like they have to be like, because I mean, we actually think about it. It's not that out of the realm of possibility. Like, oh yeah, a large corporation finding a cheap way to get rid of some of its disposal because trying to be environmentally friendly and not like poisoning people and making people sick and dumping those chemicals is not a very everyone's going to cut corners somewhere business wise when you're a corporation or a conglomerate or whatever. You're going to cut corners to make ends meet to kind of save yourself some money here and there. So they probably cut corners. I'm curious who's the one that suggested this place in Patience. Is it somewhere else and it's like dripping down into Patience, or is Patience directly the place that like they're dumping it? Is the big question. So we'll ultimately have to wait and see from there. But I think all of that finally got to Asta with like all these people getting sick and now all of this too, because knowing how she killed someone that she realizes is a bad guy, because she realizes like, oh, I thought you were a bad guy before because you're connected to people that wanted Sam dead. You were trying to kill Harry. But now it's like, oh no, you're even worse than I thought because you were poisoning people and you were trying to cover it up. So yeah, it makes you, I shouldn't feel too bad. But I love that moment from Dan because Dan's talked about it in the past, about his military history. And he even says like, yeah, I've killed people because that was what I was trained to do. Even no matter like how many lives you save in the process, like even if you save 100 lives, like it doesn't equate when you take like there is no equilibrium necessarily in that. But for him, it's like he's telling Asta it's a good thing that she feels bad because it means you still have your soul, because you once again she wanted to feel everything, and it is a good thing that she feels everything. And Dan says like, right, you don't have to carry this along. I now that I know, I can carry some of it, not all, but at least some of it. And that's the beauty of having people you can rely on, that you don't have to carry that burden on your own. She has because she once again didn't want to bother Darcy too much, because Darcy already has to hold that on, because Darcy was even saying like, right, she's used to kind of dealing with her own stuff and not other people's stuff like stacked on top of that. So but I think that was very this was the necessary episode for Asta. Like, it's still going to bother her, but I think she can finally start moving in the right direction. Another element to this is Harry being kind of oblivious to why Asta... He can tell Asta's, like, mad at him, but he can't tell why. And then he stumbles upon the fact that, like, oh, cool, alien baby is taking on the form of a human, a small human. Now I just have to find whoever it is. It's like, well, go to the person who could help you the most, and that's Max. And that is just kind of an interesting little detail, and an important thing to note, that because I don't know if they brought that up earlier this season or not, that the fact is, if an alien's in disguise, even Harry won't be able to tell. Harry only, that's why he needs Max's help, because it's like, once again, from a genetic standpoint, from an like physical standpoint from the outside, they look and are just like any human on the inside, with exception of like having their superhuman strength. That's about it. But so Harry wouldn't have been able to tell the difference. So I think that's such an interesting element, meaning that also makes it impossible for him to find this other species. You'd assume Max would be able to see the other species as well, but maybe they have a different physiology. So the gene that makes it so that Max, being one of 1,000 people who could be able to see Harry and the baby alien, maybe his genetic situation doesn't allow him to see this other species. Maybe he probably can see all alien species, which makes you extremely valuable on many different fronts, not even just to the military, but it makes you valuable in that regard. It makes you a threat to the other aliens, because they can't hide in plain sight, because you're one of the few people on this planet. I mean, just the only person in this story that we know of that can't see them, once again, because even Harry can't see them, which also gives the benefit of they can't see Harry either, potentially. So, just kind of an interesting through line there. But Harry gets Max to work for him and kind of be his servant and get him stuff. And it's just like, obviously, like, Harry's, loves messing with Max, but also he gets a servant out of it, so it all works out. Pays him, so he's able to buy the drum set, which Kate wasn't too happy about, which I love. Harry's like, oh, it's okay that you're poor. She's like, no, we're not poor. I mean, even if we were, it's okay. I mean, she's like, well, it's not okay, but still. And he's like, yeah, like, also saying, like, yeah, Max lied and said that you said it was okay. He also said that purple jacket that you're wearing is ugly. So, but Max ends up taking Harry to the alien, and while everyone's sniffing for evidence, he ends up doing his like alien call, which I feel like this is one of the first times that's ever really 100% worked out. The fact is, he was kind of able to stray the alien, I mean, not the alien, the dogs away. Granted, he got like attacked by a whole bunch of birds, like it's straight out of, isn't that Alfred Hitchcock movie just called The Birds, or just Birds? I think it's The Birds. Either way, it kind of felt like a scene straight out of that. Either way, the baby alien is stuck between listening to him and Sahar. It's like if he had taken the time out, which he wasn't going to, because it's like, right, why should I have to explain myself to you small pathetic humans? But it's like, you should have, because you need more allies on your side. I even love that line of like, it's like, Sahar's my friend. It's like, what about me? I'm your friend too. And it's like, what was it? God, what was it Max said? He's like, well, you don't treat me like a friend. And he's like, no, you're not my friend. I'm your friend. There's a big difference there. I love that stipulation. It is a very one-sided friendship in that regard, at least between both of them. But Sahar and Max could be at least his strong ally if he had allowed them to help, if he probably brought them into the fold, especially considering there's only 4 people in the entire town that knows your secret and kind of has an idea of what's going on. So you think you'd kind of like align yourself with all of them, but Harry's stubbornness to some extent. But I did like that conversation with Sahar made like, well, Max kind of got pissed at, it's like, right, Sahar's never going to talk to me again. It's like, yeah, like I might be pissed at you, but it's not like I'm not going to talk to you. Plus my religion kind of like frowns upon holding a grudge. So, but Max started ripping into him, being like, oh, that's why you have no friends. He was like, well, no, Asta's my friend. It's like, yeah, but then why is Asta not talking to you? So you don't have any friends. And now it's like realizing, here, looking at their situation. It's show actually kind of reminds me of Lucifer, whereas like, Lucifer kind of went through that same thing. I mean, it's your, I think your tropey TV thing of like, right, once you're going through a case or something like in like a procedural thing, the lessons you learn from it are applicable to what you're kind of going through. Obviously, that's a big through line in Lucifer, but I think that's applicable in a lot of stuff like iZombie and stuff of that nature. And so in this case, he learned from them like, oh, like maybe I haven't been the best, I haven't been a good friend to Asta, and he regrets it. And he was very sincere and telling Asta like, cool, I didn't tell you, but the fact is my people aren't coming to this planet because there's an alien invasion already happening, because there's another species here. I learned from baby Goliath's baby. And he's like, I'm sorry I didn't tell you. It's like, I've been a bad friend, but I want to be a better friend. Friends trust each other. And Asta's like, yeah, they do. She's like, I appreciate you being honest with me. I know it wasn't the easiest thing. So I think it works both ways for Asta, because knowing like, oh, Harry's willing to open up to me. And also knowing like, right, everything he's done has also been because like, right, he does care about me. And, I mean, that's always been the main through line, when it came to their dynamic anyway. But also the fact is that I think she's taking away from what Dan said this episode too, about kind of sharing everything of like, right, I shared everything with my dad, and now Harry's doing the same thing, and obviously like him crying and getting emotional about all of it because he felt bad about not being a good friend to Asta. So I thought that was beautiful. Some other through lines or storylines we had were the whole Kate and Ben situation. Turns out Kate isn't pregnant, but I love that they're both like, honestly, they were both slowly revealing the fact. Honestly, I'm kind of happy about it. It's like, yeah, cheers to not having children. It's like, well, we have one, and Ben's like, well, we can pretend. So it's like, okay, so it was a false positive. I was like, oh. It's like, right. It's, they were happy about it when it was coming, but I was like, I forgot. It's like, right. He did kind of talk to Darcy about the fact. I mean, both of them weren't really too happy about the notion of having another kid necessarily. I mean, if it happened, they would have loved the child, obviously, wholeheartedly. Also, it's a good thing they didn't tell Max, too. So I guess that all worked out as well. Darcy kind of dealing with everything going on right now, ends up kind of going to like the slopes and ends up running into her coach again. And there she gets treated as a celebrity. It's like, oh my God, like I've got your poster. Like, yeah, my friend, like she's obsessed with you. Like she has a poster of you. Like she looks up to you. Like she watches your like videos like like a million times. And obviously, like, her coach was telling her, like, obviously she's like, yeah, like, I stumbled a little bit in my beginning, but, yeah. And he's like, yeah, but you kind of focus on things on such a macro level. Sometimes it's just, you need to kind of pare things down to just focus on one thing at a time and then, like, just focus on one goal. And then everything else will kind of fall into place. And because she had talked about, obviously, she fell and injured herself, but he's like, right. But what do you do after that? You know, you get yourself back up. And so there's a competition coming up and Darcy's going to get ready for that. And I think that will put everything in place. I think Darcy could finally move on from the past that's kind of been holding her back and finally let go of like a lot of her own baggage that she's been holding. So we'll see how things kind of progress on that front. As I was bringing up earlier, the whole Mike and Torres thing, which you could see that look on Liv's face. I mean, to be fair, Liv was trying to get Mike on some dates earlier in the season anyway, so now seeing like what's happening between them, it's like, oh, they are really hitting off. She's like, wow, like, it's like Mike is over there, like, actually like flirting with somebody. It's like, oh, it's like, yo, you two are like really vibing together, because she actually knows about Mike because she heard about that, what was it, Mer Mike or whatever, as what he was known in the department, like that particular jewelry case that he was working on, she knows about. So once again, there's some part of me that's like, I hope we don't find out that she's actually an alien, that this is all a ploy. I don't think so, but, you know, just leaving some room for that conspiracy in my head, but we'll see. But speaking of all of that, David and the general are looking into the alien stuff. And that's so interesting. There's that guard who is an alien, the one who actually shot David. And the guy's like, oh, I'm not an alien. I'm one of their captives. And he's like, oh, how do you remember? You're not supposed to remember. And telepathically is talking to him. And it's like, oh, just remember, what was he saying? That basically almost like we could get to you at any point in time. Like, remember where you are and who you're with. Like, I could get to you. So you might want to keep your mouth shut about what you know. So I'm wondering, I mean, obviously, I guess you infiltrate the government, the military and stuff, like you want to probably dismantle the organization from the inside. He's probably like a scout, very much probably like Harry was. But his is probably like they don't want to destroy the planet. Like, well, Harry's plan was like to wipe everything out on the planet. Their idea is probably like to subjugate the human race. So they're probably not trying to wipe them out like Harry's species was trying to wipe them out. It's probably think of like, no, let's come here, exploit their weaknesses, weaken their military defenses, and make it a pretty easy transition to us kind of running things. Maybe I'm thinking too much on that, but there's the whole Ethan situation where David's kind of like, right, there's been all this other strange. He's like, there's a octopus that went missing from a Japanese restaurant. He's like, I mean, I'm sure that's unrelated. And it's like, okay, yeah, what was it, 48? 43, 48, something like that, I think. I'm blanking on the octopus that was voiced by Nathan Fillion. But putting all that aside, he just kept noticing that impatience. There's all these other coincidences that have been going down that seem like maybe the alien is still impatient. So she tested out, giving him the orb and be like, oh, this is a weapon, you know, and he uses it, but it's like, right, for one, he didn't use it the way it's supposed to be used, because he says like, oh, it's a laser, but it's like, oh, it wasn't the real thing. She gave it to him, and it's like, I was like, why would she hand the real one to him? And pushes him off a cliff, and she's like, yeah, make sure you hold on to that. So luckily he survived, which once again, I brought this up when it came to the David thing. That's so interesting, because every time Harry used it, it would disintegrate after it turned into water. So why is it that the humans are able to continuously use it? Like, I guess the way that they're using, because maybe his body uses up, because he uses it, and it's like, when it comes to what they need, it's a one-time use thing, but why does it work like for humans? Like, oh, that's the thing. Like, are they using up, like, say, like, it has 100% charge. Are humans not using as much of a charge? So, like, let's say David used, like, 5% surviving the gunshot wound. Ethan used 3%. So, is it at 92% right now charge? Like, does that happen? Or is it just because the humans have different physiology, it doesn't burn through the device? Like if Harry used it. I'm curious about the science, but not full like science, but like the explanation of why like humans are able to use it, which seems unlimited, without limit. There probably is a limit. Like I said, I'm sure there's probably like a power gauge that we're just not aware of. It probably won't be until it gets back in Harry's hands and he'll be like, yeah, this thing is almost out of juice type of thing. We'll see, because that's the last one of Harry's balls. So if he, I mean, granted they're different species, but maybe the one that's hiding amongst the military, that one probably has its own as well, devices of a similar nature, maybe. Who knows? But the general has enough knowledge being like, okay, so now Ethan, you're right, David, Ethan wasn't an alien. David's like, so did you kill him? She's like, what? We're not monsters. I was like, well, but even before we got to the next scene, I was like, well, it was pretty monstrous. Like, you knew you were hoping that he'd survive, but you didn't know for sure, because even you were like, I guess it works for anybody. It's like, you didn't know Ethan was going to survive. And then we find out where Ethan is. He's in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and they're basically getting him hooked on drugs. I was like, that's super fucked up. I was like, that is dark and super messed up. It's like, Ethan's been through the ringer, homie, being like treated like an alien, getting stabbed in the hand and all that he was being put through, and now they get him hooked on drugs. So it's just kind of like, yeah, explains like why he's been missing this entire time. It's like, that's super jacked up. It's like, the general is super twisted. Like, it's that crazy thing of like, right, when you see Linda Carter, I was about to say Linda Carter, Wonder Woman, Linda Hamilton, obviously, like, I'm not well versed in her entire like filmography. Obviously, it's like the Terminator movie, sure, but it's like, it's just because like, she's the badass action hero, the good person. To see her kind of like being a shitty human being is kind of like, wow. It's just one of those things where it's like, when you kind of, even if it's just certain things you know an actor for, when you see them play a certain role, it kind of throws you for a loop when you see them play like a bad guy. I can't remember who it was. I think I recently talked about someone else like that, where I saw them. I was like, oh, I never see you as a bad guy. I think I was talking about that with Brendan Fraser, because, like, obviously the now canceled Batgirl movie, he was going to play Firefly. He was going to be the bad guy, which I was like, I don't never really see him as a bad guy. He's always kind of like the hero to some extent, despite the complications of the character he plays on Doom Patrol. Putting all that aside. But Hamilton is in town going undercover, which is like, cool, worst time for her to be here, considering there are 2 aliens running around patients right now. I was actually surprised when the baby alien ran off and Darcy hit it. I thought like, oh man, Darcy's going to pick up the kid and there'd be kind of like a bond between them, and like, oh, she'd kind of be a pseudo parent type of thing. But it's like, nope, the baby just ran off immediately too. So I'm like, oh. Because I thought she was going to see the kid, have to take him in, and that'd be a whole rigmarole. But it's like, nope, the kid ran off in the woods. So no one has an idea where it is. Granted, it kind of latched on to Sahar, so it might come back to her eventually. We'll have to wait and see. It's definitely going to be interesting to see where the next episode takes us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.